Good evening, everyone. My name is Angie Hallman, and I'll be your moderator for tonight's Kitchener Centre Federal Debate TV for providing this important civic platform, and each of our candidates for being here. Running for office requires a deep personal commitment and time away from family, financial investment, and a willingness to put your vision for your community into the public spotlight. I sincerely thank each of you. Democracy thrives when we have participation and choices on the ballot. Each candidate will have 1 minute to introduce themselves. I'll rotate the order so every candidate has the opportunity to speak first and last across questions. You will be able to see the same timer, and I will only interrupt if the time exceeds or if comments move into personal attacks rather than constructive discussion on policy differences. Let's aim for a respectful, engaging, and formative conversation about the issues that matter most to your constituents. Let's begin with our opening statements. Brian, you'll have 1 minute to introduce yourself.
Thank you. My name is Brian Adeba, and I'm proud to be your Liberal candidate for Kitchener Centre. I've spent my career in policy and journalism, from Parliament Hill to a local think tank in our region. Today, our community faces rising costs, housing challenges, and a trade war threatening our economic sovereignty. The question becomes, who among Canada's political leaders is best positioned to lead us in protecting our sovereignty? A Mark Carney-led Liberal government will fight back with smart, practical solutions and to build the strongest economy in the G7. On the local front, Kitchener Centre needs an MP who will be at the seat of decision-making rather than from the sidelines, to ensure a strong voice to protect our future, invest in affordable housing, ensure a clean environment, and ease the cost of living. In this difficult time, a Liberal representative in Kitchener Centre is your best bet to secure your future.
Thank you. Mike.
Thank you, Angie, for hosting, and to Rogers TV. I'm Mike Morris. I've been serving as our community's Green MP since 2021 and focused since then on bringing our community's priorities to Ottawa and getting results, like the $5.4 million for new shelter spaces announced just a few months ago, and the $6 billion Canada Disability Benefit secured in Budget 2024. I've been able to do these things by working across party lines, by sharing credit, and by putting the issues ahead of scoring a political point. I'm running to continue fighting for our community in place of political slogans and slander that so many in our community are tired of, and that does nothing to help us at a time when things remain difficult for so many. Tonight I'll be sharing more about all this in hopes of earning your support again to go back to Ottawa to ensure our community's priorities are heard and acted on there.
Thank you. Ellen.
Well, thank you very much, Angie, and Rogers for having me here. I'm a grandmother and I'm very concerned about my grandchildren and family. I'm concerned about the great lack of compassion about livelihood, housing, environment, ethics, and of course, tariffs and the 51st state, elbows up, right? As a candidate for a tiny party, I'm spreading the word for compassion for those who have no voice, like animals, homeless people, and others in need, our health, our planet Earth. There is no planet B. A tree is a lifesaver, absorbing carbon a great time. Climate change is here. We had a flood in our co-op, and we almost got flooded ourselves too in our apartment. We are all worried about money, and the easy way to reduce grocery bill is not eating animal products and processed foods. Your bill will be going down and having a healthy, tasty meal. So work from compassion.
Thank you.
Hello, Kitchener Centre. It's Margarita Dyke with the United Party. Canada is in a crisis of identity and meaning. We are at a breaking point, but the United Party is doing a new thing. It was stated in 2015 that Canada would be the first post-nation state. A post-nation state means global entities that do not know the individual Canadian and have not been elected by Canadians would be making decisions on our behalf. The message is that you will be resisted at all costs. We are feeling this resistance in all arenas of life. Canadians could and should be of the most prosperous people in the world. Look at our abundance of natural resources and human capital. By unleashing our economy and resources, we could cut in half what we're paying in taxes. With responsible immigration, we could prioritize jobs for Canadians first. We have been asked to clean up our border. There are copious amounts of drug smuggling and child trafficking happening via our border. To embrace tariffs is to support organized crime and have hardworking Canadians suffer the implications. Kitchener Centre, you are critical thinkers. Let's ask questions like, why are we not hearing more about Parliament being prorogued for months on end? Or why is the Indigenous voice of J.D. Lemens with the National Citizens Inquiry not being shared more? The United Party is not made up of career politicians. While we have robust and straightforward policies, of which you can learn more at unitedpartyofcanada.ca, what we are doing is more than just policies. We carry hope. We are the voice of a growing movement of sovereignty and truth. It's time to connect back to the value system that built this amazing nation. Why don't you join us?
Our first questions will be starting with the topics of economy and affordability. Mike, you'll be the one answering first. A recent survey by a local city economic development department found 92% of manufacturing businesses anticipate being impacted by tariffs. 70% are concerned about reduced demands and sales. 55% of all respondents report direct impacts from tariffs. 79% of large employers and 86% of small businesses report being affected by uncertainty. The question, how does your party plan to address tariffs and trade relations with the U.S. and global markets, particularly in a way that supports Canadian manufacturers and protects local jobs in communities like Cambridge, Kitchener-Waterloo?
Yeah, it's a great question, one that many across our community are asking. We are the fourth most affected by these tariffs in the whole country. It's 23,000 jobs on the line, and we're seeing in the news some folks who are already facing layoffs. It's why in the months leading up to this election, I continue to make sure we need to stay united. This isn't a time to win some political argument. We need to make sure we keep the focus on the real threat, which is not one another. It's not even the American people. It's the White House. And we do that by making sure Kitchener's priorities are heard in the national response. It's why I've been calling for the revenue that comes from retaliatory tariffs to flow to the workers that, Angie, you just spoke about. We need to be there for them the way the federal government was there for folks in the pandemic, for folks who are concerned about their pensions, for small businesses, for example, like Georgette Packaging, who are significantly trade exposed to the U.S. We need to help them diversify to new markets.
Thank you. Ellen.
Well, I think we have to work with Europe more and with Asia more instead of just depending on the USA. And that way we'll can build a better community as well here. We are all immigrants, well, not all maybe, but most of us are immigrants. I'm from Holland originally. And I know my old country is looking forward to work with Canada because, you know, Canada was a liberator of the Netherlands. I wouldn't have been here if the Canadians wouldn't have liberated us. So we have a very strong bond with Canada as my old country. So, and we should work across the provinces. All the barriers should be shut down so that trade can, you know, flourish. So that's basically what I would be looking to and support, of course, all the lost jobs and workers that are now, and pensioners that are now in trouble.
Thank you. Brian.
Well, an estimated $2 billion will be generated from the counter tariffs that will be imposed on U.S. goods and services coming to this country. As a representative who is aspiring to serve the people of Kitchener, I want to see some of that money plowed back to help workers in our community. I have friends and colleagues, and I have relatives and many people that I know in this riding who work in the manufacturing sector. I want to see that some of that money comes back to them and helps them. Our party has also taken the step to ensure that access to laid off people who, as a result of the tariffs, access to EI payments will be fast-tracked. And I also want to see that, I will work to see that we actually cushion the impact, the negative impact that may accrue from these tariffs on people who are working in this riding.
Thank you. Our next question will be income and tax equity, and we'll be starting with you, Ellen. Many Canadians are struggling with the rising cost of living. Income tax policies significantly impact financial stability. What is your party's plan to ensure a fair and sustainable tax system that supports middle and lower income Canadians while maintaining essential public services?
I would say tax the X. Because really and truly what some other parties are proposing is not going to pay for anything. So we need taxes to pay for all the services that are here. We have a terrific healthcare system, and we should not lose that. And it will be also, again, as being the Animal Protection Party candidate, it will be so much better for our health when we reduce animal products in our diet, and that will also reduce the healthcare cost. And taxes are needed for building infrastructure and looking after people that are in need. So that is basically tax the rich, but not the middle class and not the low income.
Thank you. Brian.
I think we need taxes to pay for services, but I think we need realistic solutions. One is to actually make this region competitive, generate jobs, attract investment, so that we have more money in our hands. And when we have more money in our hands, we're able to disperse payments or help and assistance to all the sectors in our community that require help. Whether it's seniors, whether it's new Canadians, whether it's young people. When they have more money in their hands, then we will not even be talking about how to cut taxes and stuff like that. So we need to make this region competitive, attract more investment, create more jobs so that everyone benefits.
Thank you. Mike.
Yeah, thanks, Angie. It's an important question. I think the question had the answer in it. It's about making the tax system more fair. It's why I've spent the last number of years calling for a windfall profit tax, for example, on the oil and gas industry and on grocery chains who are gouging us and making off like bandits. The UK already has this in place. They have a 30% windfall profit tax. If we even just put in place a 15% tax on profits above $1 billion, the oil and gas industry, for example, made $20 billion in profits last year. They got another $30 billion from the federal government in subsidies. We could use that money and reinvest it to make life more affordable in public transit, for example, and helping people retrofit their homes. Another example of tax fairness is getting rid of the tax break for large corporate landlords like real estate investment trusts who are buying up units of affordable housing, kicking people out, and raising the rents. Rather than giving them a tax break, why don't we help Habitat for Humanity build more affordable homes by having them be HST exempt? That would be more fair.
Thank you. We're moving on to post-secondary education. We're starting with you, Brian. Conestoga College, the University of Waterloo, and Wilfrid Laurier University together support approximately 78,000 full-time students. What will your party do to support low and middle income students who want to pursue post-secondary education, particularly in regard to federal student loan programs?
I think that when we look at student debt, it's been rising. And my party is committed to ensuring that everyone has equitable access to education by easing the cost of accessing that kind of education. At this particular point, I think the federal government, when the Liberals are elected, will work closely with the provinces to ensure that this is brought down. This requires advocacy. Education is not the prerogative of the federal government entirely. It will need a lot of collaboration and working together with provinces to ensure that we find workable solutions that actually helps students.
Thank you. Mike.
I've actually been so impressed since being elected how organized students are in our community. When I've met with the Canadian Association of Student Associations over the last number of years, I get to hear from Conestoga students, from Laurier students, from UW students as well, many of whom live in Kitchener Centre, and I have been accountable to them. Two examples of what they've called for that I've been pushing to get into the federal budget every single year. Number one, support for the skilled trades. We've got to do better and do more to help young people consider and get into the skilled trades. The students have been calling for the apprenticeship incentive grant to be doubled. I support them in that, and if re-elected, would continue to do so. The second that they've been calling for is the Canada Student Grants to remain at a maximum of $4,200 a year. Again, it should be that for any young person, they can pursue the field of their choice without having to worry about the money to do so. These are two simple, reasonable measures that students have been calling for that I want to continue to do so too.
Thank you. Ellen.
Well, in principle, I would like to see education being free for everybody. And that can be done by taking away all kinds of subsidies, like to the oil industry and so forth, which is basically a waste of, and causes trouble for the environment. And if people are educated, there's less crime too. You will always see that in places that have good education, like in Finland, there is hardly any crime. And you know, we want to be tough on crime. Some parties are, and you know, it is not that way. You have to prevent it. You know, you don't want to go after it afterwards. You want to make sure that there is no such thing. And everybody has a right on education, so I think it should be free in principle, just like transport.
Thank you. We're moving on to foreign policy and defense. Mike, you'll be starting. What is your party's approach to defense spending and Canada's role in NATO, given rising global tensions?
Yeah, it's a position I've heard from a lot of folks in recent months with all that we're hearing from the U.S. with the absurd talks of annexation. I think it's in the minds of folks across our community more than has been in years past. I actually agree with other parties who have committed to getting to 2% by 2030. It's not an insignificant amount of money to do so, but I think it's critical that Canada steps up and plays our part as part of NATO, and getting to 2% by 2030 is reasonable. To do so, we should be investing in Arctic sovereignty, for example. Greens have proposed investments in a civilian defense corps, canceling the F-35 contract with the U.S. and looking at other partners to consider. We've got to diversify away from the U.S. and demonstrate on the global stage that we're serious about the 2% target.
Thank you. Ellen.
The 2% definitely has to happen. I was actually always against this whole weapon race and so forth, but seeing what is happening in the South right now, I have to be realistic and say we need to resist that and be prepared. And I think we can do a lot with electronic surveillance and AI probably in the future as well. There is all kinds of possibilities because we don't have a lot of resources in people to have an army that would be standing up against some big influx of other places. So I think with our AI and with our industry here, with computers and so forth, IT in our region, we could do a lot to contribute to that, and I think we should stimulate that.
Thank you. Brian.
We live in the era of great power competition. We face malign threats from countries like Russia and China, and the Arctic is increasingly the ice is breaking up, and the Arctic is becoming accessible to many people and many nations. And therefore, to protect our sovereignty, we need to have icebreakers. We're going to build those icebreakers. The Liberal Plan envisages that. We also need to look at how we can enhance our security by designing more force multipliers like drones. And also, we need to ensure that we can have an armed forces that can protect our sovereignty. And under the Liberal Plan, what is happening is we're going to look into enhancing recruitment procedures to attract more people to come to the Canadian Armed Forces and supports to Canadian Armed Forces personnel across the board.
Thank you. Our next question will start with Ellen. What is your stance on Canada's foreign policy regarding conflicts such as the war in Ukraine and Middle East?
I think we should stimulate negotiation to peace. We've always been a peace guarding nation, and we should have the tools really to talk to both parties, and certainly we should think of getting Ukraine a very fair deal. And the same thing, what is happening right now in the Middle East with Gaza is atrocious. I know that Israel has a right to defend itself, but this goes totally overboard and is causing so much suffering, also for animals, by the way. All these wars are doing a lot of damage, not only to people but animals as well, and the environment. All these mines. So we should stimulate negotiations, and we should have the tools. I know that we have the tools. This country does. So.
Thank you. Brian.
I think on Ukraine, we should not relent on offering the support that that country requires. Ukraine is the frontier between us and Russia, and between the values we hold dear and what an autocratic system like Russia will likely impose. So losing Ukraine should be out of the question. Canada should fully support Ukraine in all matters possible, including reinforcing its military strength to ensure that they hold the Russians off. On Gaza, we support negotiations. We support the release of all hostages and prisoners. We support a two-state solution. But first, hostages must be released to create the confidence-building measures that are required to reach a ceasefire. And when a ceasefire is reached, then talks should ensue to reach the two-state solution that we aspire for in the Middle East, so that there's comprehensive peace between Israel and Palestine, and each live with each other next to each other in peace.
Thank you. Mike.
Well, I think first of all, Angie, above all, Canada needs to be a voice for human rights all around the world. I've been really proud to stand with the Ukrainian community, and I actually agree with both Brian and Ellen. Standing up for Ukraine is standing up for democracy. And with the comments from the US right now, that's more clear now than ever. We need to stay united across all parties standing up for Ukraine. However, we also need to be clear that a genocide anywhere is unacceptable, that when we say never again, we mean it, regardless of what state is committing a genocide. And there is a genocide in Gaza right now. We need to continue to call for release of all hostages, as every parliamentarian has in recent years. I will continue to do so. However, the fact remains, and I disagree with Brian on this point, Canada has yet to even recognize Palestine as a state. How do you call for a two-state solution if you don't recognize one of the two states even existing? We need to recognize the Palestinian state. We need to stop equipping the IDF in the midst of a genocide and stand up for human rights all around the world.
Thank you. Ellen.
I already had.
You are correct. I'm just going to take this moment to also recognize that if you have a rebuttal for someone on the panel, please just raise your hand so I know to go to you after the end of the question. Brian, we're starting with you on Indigenous reconciliation. How will your party ensure Indigenous communities have access to clean drinking water, quality housing, and improved infrastructure?
Thank you for that question. We are of the position that all the stipulations outlined in the UN Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People should be the guiding framework for how we address Native people of our community, of our country. And that includes strengthening the kinds of supports that they require. And in the Liberal plan, there is an effort underway to ensure that access to loans to stimulate businesses within First Nations communities is actually pursued. And then also looking at any kinds of infrastructure developments that we are going to embark on involves Native or First Nations communities, and the process should be as collaborative as possible to ensure that First Nations are not left out of the table.
Thank you. Mike.
Well, it starts with listening to Indigenous leaders. Indigenous leaders put forward 94 calls to action in the TRC calls to action from back in 2016. The federal government's been so slow to pursue them that third parties like the Yellowhead Institute have stopped even tracking progress against them. As the MP for Kitchener Centre, I have been and want to go back to Ottawa to continue to call for all 94 calls to be followed. There are 231 calls to justice from the National Inquiry into Missing Women and Girls, Indigenous women and girls. Want to continue to call for those to be implemented. Angie's question asked about water specifically. It was why I actually met with Chief Hill when the federal government put forward a really important bill, C-61, that would have done more to provide clean drinking water on reserves across the country. Unfortunately, all the partisan yattering of recent months got in the way of that bill moving forward, but Six Nations wasn't even consulted. I worked with Chief Hill and brought forward amendments that she wanted to see put in place. I want to go back to Ottawa to continue that really important work.
Thanks, Mike. Ellen.
Well, again, compassion leads me here, and you know, if we are not compassionate to our fellow people, then we are really not on the right track. And unfortunately, it has been delayed. People have plans, and nobody did anything about it. Water, it could be easily solved, but there has to be willingness, and it's somehow lacking in the big picture, and the big picture is very important to also include all these things that are seemingly not so important, but they are enormously important. The mental health in Indigenous peoples is really a big concern as well, and there should be healthcare at the different locations for Indigenous people. And we can all work together that way if we listen to each other.
Thank you. We're moving on to climate change and energy. Mike will be starting first. What concrete actions will your party take to meet Canada's climate targets and support a transition to a greener economy?
Well, Angie, truthfully, where we need to start is recognizing we are the only G7 country whose emissions have gone up since world leaders first said they cared about the climate crisis back in 1990. More important than Canada's political target is what scientists tell us need to happen for a livable future for our kids. And how is it at this time in the crisis that, as I shared earlier, we're still giving the oil and gas industry $30 billion of our money every single year. We wasted $34 billion building a pipeline that the UN Secretary General calls moral and even just economic madness that will never pay itself back. I want to go back to Ottawa on behalf of our community and continue to call for science-based climate action that strengthens our community, like getting follow-through on two-way all-day GO train service, like pushing for high-speed rail that we finally saw an announcement a few months ago that should have been built across this country years ago. We also happen to be the only G7 country without high-speed rail. Pushing for an east-west electricity grid. I'll pause there with time up, but it's a lot of important work to do.
Thank you. Ellen.
So agreeing with Mike on this public transport, and actually I think public transport should be free, but anyway, it can be done. Because then people would use it more and so forth, and then there's fewer cars on the road, and the road maintenance is going to be lower, and so forth and so forth. So it's a win-win situation. But I come back to my platform is basically that 80% of agricultural land is being used for animal feed, and to reduce the use of this land and to be able to reforest this land and rewilding it is quite possible if we have now, you don't have to vote for anybody, we can do it by eating fewer animal products or not at all, and you can make lovely meals with that. And then you can have forestry jobs, you can all kinds of jobs, you can even start harvesting trees again and so forth. So it is a win-win situation.
Thank you. Brian.
Climate change is all around us. There's no point in denying that anymore. Under the Liberal plan, what we want to see is a balanced approach to fighting climate change. An approach that on one hand creates jobs and on another cuts emissions. So under that plan, we would make Canada an EV giant in the manufacturing of car batteries that will then transition us away from fossil fuels. Under that plan, I would like to see, particularly here in Kitchener, an expansion of transit. Every nook and cranny of our riding should be accessible to transport, and we should be moving on to electric buses and light rail as well. And so we are committed to a net zero path by 2030, and that is in the Liberal plan.
Thank you. We're continuing on with climate change and energy. Ellen, will be continuing with you starting first. Do you support further investments in renewable energy, and what is your party's position on improving new oil and gas projects in Canada's energy future?
I would rather not see new oil and gas production. It causes all kinds of mishap. In my old country, for instance, that there are now earth shakes and so forth, and people have their houses go down because we produced so much gas and it was all going to the other countries. But you know, we should have renewable energy for sure, and it can be done. You see it in other countries as well, and that you are mainly relying on renewable energy. And Mike, of course, he is the Green Party, so he knows all about that. So there you go.
Thank you. Brian.
I think I reiterate again, we are still dependent on fossil fuels for a while. A balanced approach that actually protects jobs while pursuing a green path is one of the pathways that we should be exploring with diligence. We want to make sure that no one is left out. We want to make sure that we cut down emissions while we transition slowly away from fossil fuels entirely. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you. Mike.
Yeah, Angie, I remember years ago when former Prime Minister Trudeau was doing his town hall, someone held up a sign. It said, "Climate leaders don't build pipelines." And that was before we knew that the TMX pipeline was going to cost $34 billion. Let's think about that. That's $2,500 per household all across our community. And so when you ask about building new pipelines and renewables, well, we need to think about the economy of the future. And we could be building that economy tomorrow if we simply stopped throwing those billions to an industry. As I shared earlier, they're making plenty of money on their own. They are 5% of the economy, but 26% of the emissions. We need to work towards electrification, as I was sharing earlier. Renewables are one part of that, but even more important is making sure we build the east-west ties so that Quebec doesn't have to sell their electricity to New York for 5 cents a kilowatt hour. We should be buying that to get the cheapest, cleanest electricity right across the country.
Thank you. We're moving on to healthcare access. We'll be starting with you, Brian. How will your party reduce wait times and improve access to healthcare services across Canada? And does your party support recognizing and integrating internationally trained healthcare professionals?
Yes, healthcare is very important. Long wait times in Ontario are actually particularly concerning. We are committed to working with the provinces to ensure equitable and accessible delivery of healthcare to everyone. And we want to make sure also that healthcare delivery is not compromised. There is a creeping privatization of healthcare in Ontario, and that is very concerning. We will be working with the provinces to ensure that this does not happen, and work collaboratively with the province to ensure that there are no clawbacks on any remittances to the healthcare support system within Ontario that comes from the federal government.
Thank you. Mike.
I appreciate you asking the question, Angie, because the federal government has a significant role to play in ensuring we have good public health care in this country. In our community, 65,000 people are without a family doctor. I speak with folks who are afraid to let go of their family doctor from where they lived before, having since moved to our community, knowing they're not sure when they're going to get through the wait list. And so I agree with Brian in terms of this is what should be the case, that it should be public health care. But the fact is right now that provinces, including the province of Ontario, are finding loopholes in the Canada Health Act. I want to go back to Ottawa to continue to push to strengthen the Canada Health Act. Right now, the federal government sends $21.4 billion to the province of Ontario for healthcare every year. We need to ensure that every cent of that goes to the best doctors and nurses in the public healthcare system so that we reduce those wait times, so that folks have access to a family doctor, and so that the best practitioners choose to stay in our community, and of course recognize the international folks you mentioned as well.
Thank you. Ellen.
Of course, healthcare is, in my opinion and our opinion of the APPC, a human right, and compassion is playing a role here again. Everybody should have a doctor and should have access to healthcare, no matter where they live. And yes, so it costs money. but you know, it costs more money if we don't do it, because we saw that with dental care, for instance, and now it is free for older people with certain income, and people don't end up in emergency rooms taking up all the time because they have a sore tooth. So it's very important to spread it out and basically support it financially. We have the money because you just have to shove some money around. That's all.
Thank you. We're moving on to human rights and gender equity. We'll be starting with you, Mike. Women's rights, including access to healthcare, protection from gender-based violence, and economic equity, remain urgent in Canada. Inclusive healthcare also means ensuring access to gender-affirming care for transgender and gender-diverse individuals. What concrete actions will your party take to protect and advance the human rights of women and gender-diverse people, and how will you ensure accountability in delivering on these commitments?
Yeah, thank you, Angie. In my view, it starts with listening to the queer community across Waterloo Region, to organizations like Women's Crisis Services and the Sexual Assault Support Center. As a man, it's part of why I wear this moose hide pin every day. It's part of my commitment that men are not always, but more often than not, the perpetrators of domestic violence. And in my view, men need to be talking about the fact that it's more than once every 6 days a woman dies in this country from intimate partner violence. Women have put forward the solutions, and we need elected leaders to follow through. As an example, in the last number of years, all parties worked together to pass Bill C-233. It's called Kira's Law. It was named in honor of a girl who died from intimate partner violence. And in her case, her parents wanted to ensure that we have better training for judges. Healthcare is another really big one that I'm running out of time on, but we need to do far better for women's healthcare and gender-affirming care as well.
Thank you. Ellen.
We have to listen again, you know, for gender equity and also, you know, it is now a very long thing, LGBTQ community. We have to listen to what is going on. It is not a frivolous thing. There are about 7 different chromosomes or so that depict gender. So it's not just two-based. And we don't know much about that yet. And people should be supported to be what they want to be or what they need to be, because they're born in a body that doesn't belong to them. And on the violence, I think education and for men especially, but also women, to be in a violent situation is a very, very difficult situation if you have kids and all that. So I support wholeheartedly to do more on the educational part as well, and sport, of course.
Thank you. Brian.
Yeah, on the queer community in Kitchener-Waterloo, or Kitchener Centre specifically, we stand with the stipulations of the Canadian Charter of Rights, Section 15C, that ensures that everyone should be treated equally before the law without any regard to the without any regard to any on the basis of race, sex, gender, anything like that. So we support that, and we look forward to ensuring that that is implemented. On women's rights, I think women have a right to their body, and that's one thing that we stand for. We also stand for like their access to medical care, right to control their bodies, contraceptives, and also to tighten laws. We are going to tighten the criminal code to ensure that violence perpetrators are held accountable.
Thank you. With us heading to the ballots very shortly, one of the things that is passionate for me personally is facing that we're heading to the ballot again with a first past the post approach. Ellen, I'm wondering if you can start first on your opinion of that system, or if you have a different system in mind.
Oh yeah, well, I'm a part of the Fair Vote Canada, and I really want to get this first past the post out of the way, because it is a very unfair system that a party with 30% can actually rule a majority with a majority. So that is not right. And you can have smaller parties coming also into the play. which is good because smaller parties are basically the little voice on the shoulders of the other bigger parties to say, hey, there are some issues that are often forgotten, like the animals and so forth. So I am very much for changing the system, and there was a commission or a committee that looked at it in the past, and then Mr. Trudeau threw it out. That was not what he was voted for or what he was standing for in the election. So I hope we can do that again. So it's very important.
Thank you. Brian.
Proportional representation is a fair way to ensure that every voice in our democracy is heard. On a personal level, I support that idea, and I will work hard when elected to see if I can push with fellow MPs to get that across the board. However, I also note right now that there is not a lot of appetite for it right now within Canada, and I urge those who are supporters of proportional representation to actually begin standing up and fighting harder, and we will join you in this fight to ensure that it actually is brought to the table.
Thank you. Mike.
Yeah, thanks. I'm not sure that that's totally fair. The Prime Minister back in 2015 promised 1,800 times that'd be the last election under first past the post. I was proud to stand up on behalf of our community and call him out on that directly in the House of Commons. More constructively, also, I put forward motion 76. It even just called for a citizens' assembly, kind of like a group of Canadians that would hear from experts to make recommendations on electoral reform. In fact, other parties, including the Liberal Party, had endorsed that idea. Fair Vote Canada volunteers like Ellen worked hard engaging with folks across the country. I was glad to see 39 Liberal MPs broke party rank. They supported the motion. 3 Conservatives did as well. It got put forward as an NDP motion, my having worked with an NDP colleague on that. Unfortunately, it was voted down because the 2 big parties voted against it. What I hear every single day knocking on doors in our community is that folks have not forgotten that broken promise, that the simple fact is every vote should count. And I want to go back to Ottawa to continue to work for exactly that.
Thank you. Brian, we'll be starting with you on this question. During the times of COVID, communities and people rallied behind Made in Canada and supporting your community. I feel like we're under a time like this again, where Canadians are really looking to support Made in Canada. How does your party support that direction and also food sovereignty that we're also facing at this time?
Very good question. Thank you. As you know, one of the announcements that Prime Minister Mark Carney made recently was on breaking down interprovincial barriers within Canada that prohibit trade among provinces and limit our capacity to earn more between us here in Canada. So what's happening right now, our party envisages bringing down these barriers and ensuring that local production in Canada is enhanced. We buy Canadian and we support our own economy in light of the fact that the US is no longer a reliable partner. I forgot the last question again.
Sorry, and also about food sovereignty. How
Yeah.
does your party address food sovereignty?
Yes, we are going to defend supply management, cut down red tape to ensure farmers, ranchers, and agri-food workers are protected and enhance food production. That's one of the steps that we're going to do. That's a high-level point there. And then protect supply management, especially the sectors that include poultry. Sorry, I ran out of time.
Great.
Yep.
Thank you. Mike.
Thank you, Angie. On the second part of the question, I'd start by first of all making clear we need to protect the farmland that feeds us. We have a countryside line in this community that local elected folks have fought for many years. We need to protect that. We can house people. We can be building up rather than out, and particularly with respect to the land assembly that folks like farmers in Wilmot Township have been standing up against, we need to recognize that there are other parcels of land that are available, not the most prime agricultural land that needs to be defended. The first part of your question, though, Angie, is also important because it's not just about protecting at this time of tariffs, but strengthening our economy. I agree with Brian and the Liberal Party. We need to be reducing interprovincial trade barriers. We could do it by providing more incentives as we see premiers coming forward who seem to want to do the right thing. But in our community, we need to get money flowing to small businesses who need and want to diversify to new markets. We have examples like VCT Group, who are seeing an increase in the price of raw materials when nothing has flowed across the border. We need to protect against that gouging and strengthen our local economy.
Ellen.
Well, I think certainly we have to take down the barriers between provinces and buy more Canadian and maybe from other countries that are not the USA. Because what is happening now with the 51st state, that is of course a ridiculous but threatening situation, because I don't think it is just a joke. And I'm quite concerned about it, being from Holland, where my parents went through World War II, and it was a lot of suffering, and I'm not going to stand for that. I'm telling you that right now. We are concerned about farms, but family farms, because you have big farms, and I think they have pushed family farms out of the way. And of course, we are for getting a lot of the agricultural land transformed to feed for people and not for animals, because the animals that are raised, they are suffering a lot in the industrial farming. So, I'm out of time.
Thank you. Mike, we'll be starting with you. What is your party's stance on supporting public broadcasting like CBC?
That's an easy one. Strongly support and deeply appreciate the work of the CBC, but also feel that more needs to be done to make sure CBC reaches a variety of audiences. I spoke with somebody at their door a few days ago, and that person said to me he doesn't see any value from the CBC for him. And so that makes me want to go back to Ottawa and make sure I understand what he would be wanting from the CBC to ensure that as parliamentarians we defend the funding for the CBC across all platforms, make sure CBC keeps up with the times to reach audiences in different demographics. Dans tous les deux langues officielles, on a besoin d'assurer que le Radio-Canada aussi ont les fonds qu'ils ont besoin pour être là pour les Québécois et Québécoises aussi, et les francophones dans notre communauté aussi. I want to go back to Ottawa to continue to stand up to protect the CBC and make sure it stays relevant to Canadians and folks in our community of all ages.
Thank you. Ellen.
Well, it would be ridiculous not to have a national broadcasting system, and I'm always being a supporter for the CBC. And it is very important, but they're a little bit scared, it seems, sometimes to take up certain issues. And that is what I'm quite concerned about, and maybe that is something that has to be addressed. I don't know where people think that they don't get support or they don't see themselves back into the CBC. Well, maybe some do. I think it is very important to have CBC and wholehearted support, any support that we can give to CBC, because it has to stay around. Without it, we are not really a national country that is respecting itself.
Thank you. Brian.
As a former journalist, I support the CBC entirely and will stand up to protect it from any influences that will reduce its influence, reduce or cut it down entirely as proposed by the Conservatives. To that effect, the Liberal Party has committed $150 million to ensure that the CBC remains active in its work and reaches all parts of Canada entirely. And what we're going to do as a party is ensure that we revisit the the CBC Act and protect it using that legislation so that folks like Pierre Poilievre don't have a chance or an opportunity to undermine the CBC, which is an institution that identifies us as Canadians.
Thank you. We'll be starting the next question with you. My question is on immigration and migrant farm workers. How does your party support controlling the number of immigrants to allow a sustainable country and also allowing for temporary farmer workers to come in and help us sustain our working lands?
I think our party is for compassion, so merely look at the circumstances of the migrants and the immigrants that are working and that they have a proper standard of living, and that is very important. So to put a curb on it, what do we need? We need workers so that are working the land and so forth. I mean, it's happening in the US as well, and now they're cutting it down. They will see the repercussions of that, the ramifications. So I think we should support that and make sure that they have a good standard of living.
Thank you. Brian.
We need immigrants for our labor market. However, our party envisages that when we bring immigrants in, there must be a plan to ensure that there are services to cater to these immigrants. We want to make sure that immigration is tied to available resources here within Canada. We don't want a situation where immigrants come in and find that there are housing shortages, there's a shortage of doctors and all of that. So the plan is to ensure that the immigration is matched to the level of services available within the country.
Thank you. Mike.
Yeah, I would agree with Brian. That is so important that we make sure when newcomers come to our community and across the country, we have the housing and the healthcare and the jobs to ensure they thrive here. It's what Reception House and other settlement agencies have been calling for. However, we can't talk about this question and not mention the fact that there's a local college that went from 700 international students a decade ago to over 31,000. And the federal government was asleep at the switch. There was no targets for temporary residents in the Levels plan. That meant that if somebody asked for a study permit, they just got one. No questions asked. We need to make sure, and what I've been doing the last number of years, I put forward motion 98 with 10 constructive measures to address this issue. I was really glad to work with the Minister of Immigration on this. I was successful in securing 4 amendments to government policy on how we recruit international students to ensure that we stop the exploitation of the students, but also ensure that our communities can receive the numbers. As one example, we've doubled the amount of money that a student has to have when they arrive to make sure they're set up for success and not lied to about how much life costs when they get to Canada.
Thank you. Another issue that many Canadians are becoming more increasingly concerned about is our protection of our forestry resources. Brian, how does your party address that?
My party is committed to an environmental programs that ensures that our forests are protected and they're also accessible to people that visit them. And at this particular point, the Prime Minister has announced a comprehensive plan that ensures that there's stability, that forests are taken care of in a way that that is sustainable and protect them for our future generations.
Thank you. Mike.
Another important question, Angie, that calls into the reality that it used to be that the tree cover in Canada was a carbon sink. Now, as a result of the climate crisis, it's a carbon source. We have actually more emissions, or almost as many, 647 megatons of emissions from wildfires in 2023, compared to 700 or so megatons in every other sector across the country. We need to ensure there's better forest management practices. Jasper last year would be one example. I'm the MP for Kitchener Centre, though. I want to make sure when we think about forest management, it's making sure we stand up and take action on the climate crisis, that we play our part, because the reality is when it comes to forestry, any number of other impacts, we're seeing the reality of the climate crisis on our doorstep.
Thank you. Ellen.
And of course, I come again back to the 80% of agricultural land that is being used for animal feed. And if we could even just reduce it so that you get half of that land and plant forest there, yeah, it takes a bit of time, but then you would have indeed a carbon sink. And if you plant enough, then you can still manage the forest and get some wood out of it. I'm totally upset with the old growth forest being attacked nowadays in BC, and I think they should not touch that at all. And I think what I saw also on a trip through Canada via train, you would come where all kinds of trees were there. But if you look at the trees that were along the tracks, you saw clear cut. It was horrible. So we can plant forests to prevent fires in a certain way. So it is all possible to do that so you don't get forest fires.
Thank you. Well, we have spent an hour together. We're at the moment now of our closing remarks. Mike, you'll start with the closing remarks this evening.
Well, Angie, we haven't had a chance to talk about the housing crisis yet, and so maybe I'll just share about a few items that haven't come up in the questions so far. Our community is in a housing crisis. I want to make sure I'm going back to Ottawa to fight for the affordable housing we need. As folks are getting rent-evicted, we need to change the definition of affordable to make sure our money, taxpayer money, goes to build the affordable housing we need. We need to continue to call out the need for mental health supports. There was a $4.5 billion mental health transfer commitment last election. Those are dollars that I hear loud and clear we need to bring to our community. We've yet to get a timeline on two-way all-day GO train service, another really critical issue that hasn't come up in this conversation yet. We haven't spoken about seniors specifically. Single seniors who are living on GIS, for example, that are living below the poverty line. And of course, when it comes to poverty, we have 40% of those living in poverty are folks with disabilities. I'm really proud of the work I did on the disability benefit to improve that, but it's nowhere near where it needs to be. We need to do better by folks with disabilities. It's another part of what I want to go back to Ottawa to continue to fight for our community and work with others to get some things done.
Thank you. Ellen.
Thank you, Angie. Well, you've heard all the candidates right now, and I have to say that the Green Party is close to my heart, and I know they will heed many of the concerns of our Animal Protection Party, like it's happening in the Netherlands, where the Partij voor de Dieren is basically a little voice of conscience. So we want to make sure that people understand there's a lot of mishap with animals in the bio industry and so forth. So we have to do something about that. There's one thing that we can do ourselves by becoming more or less vegan. They call our party a one-issue party, but compassion is the way we go. And housing is very important. I live in a co-op. There should be more co-ops, and the development should be controlled so that people cannot be kicked out like that. So there is no planet B. So let's work on getting it better, and we can do it ourselves. It's not even needed to go voting, but do vote.
Thank you. Brian.
I'm Brian Adeba. The Liberals have the boldest plan to fight for our sovereignty, fix the housing crisis, and protect the things that make Canada strong: our environment, our public broadcaster, and our inclusive identity. A commitment to the values that we hold dear in Kitchener Centre, whether it is advocating for housing or the environment, is good. But having the clout in Parliament to deliver on those values is even more important. Kitchener Centre deserves a strong representative in Ottawa who sits at the decision-making table and has the capacity to deliver. I look forward to earning your trust on April 28th. Thank you.
We've now reached the end of our debate. I'd like to sincerely thank all of our candidates for sharing their time, perspectives, and vision for Kitchener Centre. Your participation is vital to the democratic process. Thank you again, Rogers TV, for your continued support in promoting civic engagement through accessible local broadcasting. Have a great evening.